Stop looking for happiness where you lost it. You keep walking through the same memories as if one day they'll open a different door. You revisit the messages, the faces, the streets that once made you feel alive, believing that if you look hard enough, you'll find the version of yourself you lost there. But that place doesn't exist anymore. The moment you're chasing is gone, and the pain you keep touching is only a ghost of what was. The truth is simple. You will never find peace in the ruins of what broke you. We are creatures of memory. We hold on because it feels safer to suffer in the familiar than to walk toward the unknown. We mistake comfort for healing. We think that if we could just fix the past, happiness would return. But the Stoics remind us nothing is ever the same twice. Not the river, not the day, not you. The world moves forward, yet you remain anchored to what's gone, asking it to return what it can no longer give. Every moment you search for happiness where you lost it, you trade the present for an illusion. You imprison yourself in repetition, reliving old wounds disguised as hope. The person who left, the dream that failed, the path that ended. They are teachers, not destinations. Pain is not there to be revisited, it's there to be understood. Once understood, it must be released. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs." He did not mean surrender to loss. He meant transform it into strength. So ask yourself, why do you keep looking for sunlight in a place that no longer has a sky? Why do you return to the scene of your own heartbreak, expecting resurrection? There is no life in what has already completed its purpose. The Stoic way is not about forgetting. It's about seeing things as they are. The past is not your home, it's your lesson. And until you stop knocking on closed doors, the open ones ahead will remain unseen. There is a strange comfort in returning to the places that hurt us. We tell ourselves we're seeking closure, but what we're really seeking is familiarity. The mind clings to repetition because it fears emptiness. When something ends, a void appears, and rather than face it, we rush back to the noise that once filled it. That's why people stay in broken relationships, chase dead dreams, or scroll through old memories at midnight. Not because they believe it will heal them, but because it makes them feel something when they fear feeling nothing. The Stoics understood this weakness of the human soul. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from the stories we keep telling about them. The heartbreak, the loss, the betrayal. They happened once, but every time you replay them in your mind, you give them permission to wound you again. You keep reopening a scar that could have become a mark of wisdom. This is not healing, it's self-inflicted captivity. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he was describing the exact battle most people lose daily. You cannot control who left, what ended, or where you failed, but you can control the meaning you attach to it. You can choose to see the end not as punishment, but as liberation. You can decide that what was lost is not a part of you anymore. It was a chapter that served its role. To stop looking for happiness where you lost it, you must first recognize the illusion of comfort. Pain disguises itself as safety because it's familiar, but safety built on sorrow is only a softer prison. The Stoic path begins when you stop trying to relive what's gone and start rebuilding what's within. That is the moment you take your first step toward inner freedom. We often believe that if we return to what we lost, we can somehow revive it, that love can be rekindled, that meaning can be recovered, that broken things can become whole again if only we try hard enough. But this is a myth born from longing, not truth. What once gave you joy existed under conditions that no longer exist. The people, the moments, even the version of yourself that lived them, all have changed. You're not walking into the same story, You're revisiting the ashes of one that already burned. The Stoics would call this the tragedy of attachment. When you attach your happiness to what is external, you hand over your peace to the unpredictable. Marcus Aurelius warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The modern mind, however, keeps rewriting the same failed equation, believing that by re-entering the past, the outcome will somehow shift. But truth does not bend to nostalgia. The flame that once warmed you can no longer burn the same way. Every attempt to resurrect the past is an act of resistance against the natural order of life. To fight impermanence is to fight reality itself. You cannot breathe life into what has fulfilled its purpose. The Stoic accepts this, not with cold indifference, but with clarity, understanding that endings are not enemies, they are transitions. The flower that wilts feeds the soil for what comes next. To cling to what has died is to deny what could be born. The path to peace begins when you stop trying to resurrect what no longer belongs to you. Happiness is not something you find again, it's something you rebuild differently. Every loss, if faced with wisdom, becomes a seed. But only if you stop digging through the graveyard of your own past, expecting to find it blooming there again. Letting go is not difficult because of the weight of the past. It's difficult because of the illusion of control. You believed that if you held on long enough, the story could still change, that your effort could rewrite destiny. But control is a comforting fiction. The Stoics knew that the only thing you truly command is your own mind. Everything else, people, outcomes, time itself, remains outside your reach. Yet humans resist this truth because surrender feels like defeat. We confuse acceptance with giving up, when in truth, it is the highest form of strength. The need for control comes from fear. Fear that if we release the past, it will mean that all the pain we endured was meaningless. Fear that without the familiar chaos, we will face the silence of uncertainty. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Meaning is not found in control, but in alignment. To live well is not to dominate life, but to move in rhythm with it. Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept whatever comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny." Those words are not submission, they are liberation. You do not let go because you no longer care. You let go because you finally understand. You see that holding on to what's gone keeps you chained to an illusion that robs you of presence, of growth, of peace. When you stop demanding that life return what it took, you begin to see that it has already given you something else: wisdom. The lesson hidden in loss is that nothing external can complete you. The moment you stop fighting reality, you stop suffering twice. First from what happened, and then from refusing to accept it. So when the time comes to release what you've been carrying, don't ask, "How do I forget?" Ask instead, "What is life teaching me through this ending?" That question is the first act of real power, not over the past, but over yourself. Memory is a seductive liar. It doesn't show you what happened. It shows you what you wish had lasted. It filters pain through the lens of longing, turning even suffering into something you miss simply because it felt alive. This is how nostalgia becomes a prison, disguised as comfort. You begin to confuse the ache for beauty, believing that revisiting the past is a way to honor it. But in truth, it's how you keep yourself from living. The Stoics warned against this subtle form of slavery. Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." By reliving what is gone, you suffer events that exist only in imagination. You build temples to memories and worship them as if they still hold power. But memory is not a sacred space. It's a mirror that must be looked at only to understand, not to remain inside. When you dwell there too long, reflection becomes obsession, and wisdom turns into self-torment. Nostalgia whispers that the past was better, simpler, purer. Yet the past was never as golden as you remember. It was simply the moment when you hadn't yet learned its cost. The mind edits out the pain, the flaws, the truth, and leaves only the echo of what felt good. That echo is dangerous. It convinces you that happiness is something you've lost, rather than something you can create again. The Stoic mind sees through this illusion. It honors the past, but refuses to live in it. To break free, you must see memory for what it is, a story written by a version of you that no longer exists. Read it, learn from it, and close the book. The life you are meant to live begins when you stop trying to return to the chapter that already ended. Happiness isn't waiting behind you. It's ahead, hidden in the page you've been afraid to turn. The present moment is the only place where life truly exists, yet it is the last place most people ever live. The past feels safer because it is already known, and the future feels tempting because it holds possibility. But the present, raw, uncertain, silent, demands courage. It's where you must face yourself without distraction. The Stoics taught that peace is not found by escaping reality, but by inhabiting it completely. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," he wasn't promoting indifference, he was revealing the path to freedom. To live in the present is to reclaim power from illusion. The mind wants to wander, to revisit, to imagine, to fix. But every time it leaves the now, it leaves you powerless. You cannot heal what has already passed, and you cannot control what hasn't come. You can only act with virtue here, in this moment, the only moment that ever truly belongs to you. The Stoic way is not about suppressing emotion, but about mastering awareness. You feel, you acknowledge, and you let the feeling pass like clouds drifting across the sky, never fighting the weather, only observing it. This is where true strength is born. Presence transforms pain into understanding, chaos into rhythm, noise into silence. When you anchor your attention in the now, you dissolve regret and anxiety, both illusions created by a mind detached from the present. Happiness isn't a treasure hidden in memory. It's a state that unfolds the moment you stop resisting what is. Every breath you take without yearning backward or forward is an act of quiet victory. So stop searching the ruins of your past and the mirages of your future. The peace you crave has been here all along, waiting in the stillness between your thoughts. You only need to return to yourself, to this instant, and recognize that nothing outside it has ever held the power to make you whole. Loss is not the enemy of happiness. It is the architect of wisdom. Everything you have ever lost has left behind something invisible but essential: awareness. The pain that once seemed unbearable became the soil from which your resilience grew. The Stoics never sought a life without loss. They sought the strength to remain unshaken when loss arrived. For Marcus Aurelius, every misfortune was a lesson in disguise, every ending a reminder that what is taken from us often removes what was never truly ours to keep. To transform loss into strength, you must stop asking why it happened and start asking what it revealed. Did it expose an attachment, a dependence, a false sense of control? The Stoic path turns pain into philosophy, not by denying emotion, but by elevating it into understanding. The moment you see suffering not as a punishment, but as a teacher, it changes shape. It no longer consumes you, it instructs you. That is where transformation begins. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." A loss strips away the illusions that comforted you, leaving only what is real, and what is real cannot be broken. Through hardship, you learn the difference between what is temporary and what is eternal. You learn that happiness born from possessions, people, or outcomes is fragile, but happiness born from inner alignment endures. When you begin to see loss as part of the natural rhythm of existence, it loses its power to wound. You stop pleading for the past to return and start thanking it for what it taught. That shift from resistance to gratitude is the mark of true Stoic strength. The scars remain, but they no longer represent suffering. They represent survival, discipline, and growth. Attachment is the quiet thief of peace. It begins as love, as passion, as care. But when it transforms into dependence, it becomes a chain around the soul. You start to believe that your happiness lives in someone else's hands, that your worth depends on being wanted, that your identity is tied to what you possess. This is how you lose yourself. The Stoics warned that what you cling to most tightly often becomes the source of your greatest suffering. For when life takes it away, as life inevitably does, you discover that you had mistaken the reflection for the source. Freedom is not the absence of love or ambition, it is the absence of slavery to them. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." What disturbs the modern mind is not loss itself, but the terror of existing without what once defined it. Yet the Stoic understands, you can still love deeply, but you must love freely, without ownership, without demand, without fear of its end. Detachment is not coldness. It is the art of remaining whole in a world that constantly changes form. To live unattached is to live fully aware that everything you have can vanish, and still to choose gratitude. It is to hold the world gently, knowing it is borrowed. The more you grasp, the more life slips away. The more you let flow, the more you truly possess. When you release attachment, you reclaim authority over your own peace. You stop negotiating with life for happiness, and you begin to embody it. That is the essence of Stoic freedom, to walk through the world with open hands and an anchored heart. You no longer need to look for happiness where you lost it, because you carry it with you wherever you go. Acceptance is not weakness. It is mastery over what cannot be controlled. Most people resist reality because they think acceptance means approval, as if to accept a loss is to agree with it. But the Stoic knows that acceptance is the highest form of wisdom. It is seeing things exactly as they are, without distortion, complaint, or denial. You do not accept because you enjoy the pain. You accept because truth is the only ground where peace can be built. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not hope that events will happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do." This is not fatalism, it is alignment. To resist what has already happened is to waste life itself. Every ounce of energy spent wishing reality were different is energy stolen from the only moment where you can act, the present. Acceptance redirects that energy inward, transforming chaos into clarity. You stop shouting at the storm and start learning how to stand in it. This discipline requires courage because it demands the death of illusion. You must let go of the idea that the world owes you fairness, that people must understand you, that outcomes should match your effort. The Stoic understands that life follows its own rhythm, sometimes harmonious, sometimes harsh, but always precise. To accept this is not to surrender your will, but to refine it. You align your actions with what is real, not with what you wish were real. When you practice acceptance, the world stops being your enemy. You no longer fight time, loss, or imperfection. You learn to move with them. The heart becomes quiet, not because nothing hurts anymore, but because you finally understand that hurt is a part of living. And from that silence, a deeper strength rises, one that no disappointment can destroy. There comes a moment when you stop trying to rebuild what was lost and begin to rebuild yourself. That is the moment of rebirth, the silent turning point where pain becomes purpose. You are no longer the person who once stood in that broken place. Every loss, every mistake, every unanswered question has reshaped you. The Stoics would call this metamorphosis, the transformation of chaos into order, of wound into wisdom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, The universe is change, life is opinion. Everything shifts, including you. Rebirth is not loud. It doesn't arrive with triumph or applause. It begins quietly, in the stillness where you finally stop fighting the past. You start to see that what you thought was the end was actually a preparation, a dismantling of false foundations so that you could build on truth. You no longer need to be who you were to find peace. You need to become who this moment demands. The Stoic rebirth is not about escaping pain, but integrating it until it no longer defines you. In this new state, your identity no longer depends on titles, approval, or memory. You begin to act, not react. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You seek less validation, but your presence commands respect. The man or woman who has faced loss and accepted it stands unshaken, not because the world is easier, but because the soul is steadier. That is the power of rebirth. It doesn't promise comfort, it delivers clarity. When you rise from what broke you, you understand a truth that changes everything. Nothing you lose can take away what you become. You stop asking why it happened and start asking who you are becoming through it. That question transforms pain into fuel and endings into beginnings. This is where happiness returns, not where you lost it, but where you finally found yourself. After every storm, there is a silence that most people fear. But that silence is where transformation takes root. You've cried, fought, resisted, questioned, and searched for meaning in what broke you. Yet healing is never loud. It happens in the calm that follows surrender, when the mind finally stops demanding explanations and begins to listen. The Stoics lived in that silence. They sought not the noise of victory, but the peace of understanding. Marcus Aurelius would write at dawn, alone with his thoughts, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly. The stillness after pain is not emptiness. It's rebirth, disguised as quiet. It's the pause before a new chapter begins, where you finally learn that nothing external was ever meant to complete you. The noise of loss fades, and in its absence, you hear something purer, your own strength. The same place where you once felt broken becomes the ground where discipline, peace, and purpose take root. This stillness is not the absence of struggle, it's the mastery of response. To reach this state, you must stop searching for happiness as a destination. Happiness is not found, it is built. It is carved from self-respect, from the discipline of presence, from the acceptance of what is, and the gratitude for what remains. When you stop clinging to what you've lost, you make space for what you were meant to receive. That space, that silence, and is where the Stoic soul lives. So let the world move. Let time take what it must. You are not what you've lost. You are what survived. True peace begins when you no longer chase the echoes of the past, but walk calmly into the present, carrying nothing but the wisdom that pain has left behind. And in that stillness, at last, you find it. The happiness that was never lost, only waiting to be seen. Moving forward is not about speed, it is about direction. Most people rush into distractions after loss, trying to fill the void with noise, achievements, or new faces. But the Stoic does not move to escape, he moves to evolve. Forward movement is not a sprint away from pain. It is a disciplined walk toward truth. It is understanding that healing is not forgetting, but remembering without suffering. You carry the memory, but no longer the weight. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." To move forward is to use the very thing that tried to break you as the fuel for growth. The heartbreak that once weakened you now strengthens your empathy. The failure that once humiliated you now sharpens your clarity. Nothing is wasted when seen through the lens of purpose. Every obstacle becomes instruction. Every wound becomes a teacher. But you cannot walk forward while looking back. Reflection without movement turns to decay. To move forward is to forgive reality. Not because it was fair, but because you refuse to remain a prisoner of it. Forgiveness, in Stoic terms, is not emotion. It is liberation from illusion. You stop expecting the past to give you closure and decide to close it yourself. You stop seeking apologies from others and offer peace to your own heart. The wisdom of moving forward lies in quiet acceptance that life has already chosen what to remove, and your task is to choose what to build. You take one step, then another, and somewhere along the way, the pain begins to lose its name. It becomes part of your story, but no longer your identity. That is how the Stoic moves, not away from the past, but beyond it, calmly, intentionally, without fear of what comes next. When everything around you collapses, what remains is what you have built within. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, a fortress of reason, virtue, and clarity that no loss can breach. Life will strip you of many things: people you love, dreams you cherished, plans you trusted. But it can never strip you of the strength you cultivate inside. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he knew his real kingdom was his mind. A man's worth, he wrote, is no greater than the worth of his ambitions. The modern Stoic understands this. External chaos is inevitable. Internal chaos is optional. To build your inner fortress, you must lay each stone with discipline. Each act of restraint becomes a wall. Each moment of understanding becomes a gate. Each acceptance of truth becomes a foundation. The fortress is not made of cold detachment. It is forged from calm awareness. It is where emotion is felt, but not obeyed. Where fear is seen, but not followed. Where doubt arrives, but never rules. Most people collapse because they build their identity outside of themselves, in relationships, possessions, or reputation. When those crumble, so do they. But the Stoic stands firm because his peace is self-sustained. The fortress within him is not built overnight. It is built through every hardship he survives without bitterness. Every storm that once seemed like destruction becomes another layer of strength. When your fortress is complete, silence becomes your ally, solitude your temple, and discipline your weapon. You no longer need to search for happiness where you lost it, because it now resides in the one place it was always meant to, within the walls of your own mind. The Stoic does not escape the world. He simply becomes unbreakable in it. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the crucible where the self is reforged. When you detach from the world's noise, you begin to hear the voice that has always guided you, your own reason. The modern world fears being alone because silence exposes the mind's chaos. But the Stoic seeks that silence intentionally, knowing that only in stillness can truth emerge. Seneca reminded his students that a man who is never alone is never truly free, for he depends on others to distract him from himself. In solitude, you learn the difference between isolation and introspection. Isolation happens when you run from the world. Introspection happens when you return to yourself. The first weakens, the second strengthens. When you sit in silence, you meet the thoughts you've avoided, the disappointments, the regrets, the unspoken fears. You confront them not as enemies, but as teachers. This encounter is uncomfortable but necessary. Growth does not occur in comfort, it unfolds in confrontation. The Stoic does not hide from solitude, he commands it. He uses it to sharpen judgment, to observe emotion, to discipline desire. Solitude becomes a weapon against distraction and dependency. In that stillness, you discover that peace was never lost in the noise, it was buried beneath it. Each moment spent alone refines your understanding of what truly matters, what is real, what endures, what belongs to you. To stand alone without feeling alone is the mark of the self-mastered. You no longer chase validation, you no longer beg for company to feel complete. You walk into solitude not to escape life, but to prepare for it. And when you emerge from that silence, you do so stronger, steadier, and more certain of your own power. For you have learned the greatest Stoic truth: the man who commands himself is never truly alone. To the untrained mind, emotion is chaos. To the Stoic mind, it is raw energy waiting to be transformed. Anger, grief, jealousy, and fear are not enemies, they are materials. The Stoic doesn't suppress them, he refines them. This is emotional alchemy, the discipline of turning pain into power, loss into learning, despair into clarity. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, illness, and death, yet he never asked for a lighter burden, only for the strength to carry it wisely. Emotional alchemy begins with awareness. You do not deny how you feel, you observe it, you name it without judgment. The moment you say, "This is anger," or "This is fear," you become larger than it. You shift from being consumed by the emotion to mastering it. The Stoic transforms the inner storm by redirecting its force. Anger becomes focus, grief becomes empathy, fear becomes preparation. Every emotion has a purpose when placed under reason's command. This transformation demands discipline. The undisciplined soul reacts. The disciplined one responds. When someone wounds you, you choose reflection instead of retaliation. When the world disappoints you, you choose gratitude instead of despair. These choices may seem small, but they forge an unbreakable inner structure. The Stoic understands that emotion, when ruled by reason, becomes fuel for greatness. Emotional alchemy is not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming unstoppable. You no longer drown in the tide of feelings, you learn to sail it. This mastery doesn't numb your humanity, it amplifies it. You still feel deeply, but nothing owns you anymore. The storms still come, but you are now the calm at their center, unmoved, aware, and in command of your own soul. After the storms of attachment, loss, and longing, there comes a return, not to what once was, but to what has always been within. Inner harmony is not something gained through conquest. It's remembered through clarity. It's the recognition that peace was never taken from you, only obscured by the noise of desire and illusion. Marcus Aurelius called it returning to yourself, the daily act of coming home to the mind that is calm, disciplined, and aligned with reason. Inner harmony begins when you stop treating life as something that owes you and start seeing it as something that teaches you. The world will never conform perfectly to your expectations, but your perception can adapt to it. Harmony is not the absence of struggle. It is the art of moving through struggle without losing your center. The Stoic mind remains balanced because it measures life not by what happens, but by how it responds. When your thoughts, words, and actions flow in the same direction toward virtue, truth, and discipline, inner conflict dissolves. You no longer chase what you cannot control or resist what must occur. You simply act, guided by principle, detached from outcome. This alignment between reason and action is serenity itself. The noise of the world becomes distant, not because it stops, but because you no longer amplify it inside your mind. True harmony is silent. It is not celebrated or noticed by others, but felt deeply within, in the way you breathe, speak, and decide. It's the calm that follows understanding, the balance that emerges when you stop running. And in that stillness you realize, happiness was never lost in the world outside. It was misplaced within your own perception. The Stoic journey ends not with applause, but with quiet mastery, the kind that turns ordinary existence into peaceful strength. Mastery is not domination over others, it is dominion over yourself. It is the moment when reason governs impulse, when patience silences panic, and when wisdom replaces reaction. The Stoics pursued mastery not as a title, but as a state of being. Marcus Aurelius ruled millions, yet his truest empire was his mind. To command yourself in the face of chaos, to remain unmoved by praise or insult, to act from principle rather than passion, that is the Stoic definition of power. The serenity of mastery comes when you stop chasing control over the external world and focus entirely on what is within your reach, your thoughts, your judgments, your actions. You learn that the world will always be unpredictable, but your response doesn't have to be. This is not coldness, it's composure. You still feel the full spectrum of human emotion, but you decide what each feeling becomes. The anger becomes fuel for justice. The sorrow becomes depth. The disappointment becomes discipline. When mastery takes root, life no longer shakes you as it once did. The highs and lows still arrive, but they no longer define you. You observe them, learn from them, and continue forward, calm, deliberate, awake. This serenity is not passive acceptance, it's active awareness. You are not escaping the storm. You are steering through it with both hands steady on the helm. In mastery, you no longer need to look for happiness where you lost it because you have outgrown the need to seek it at all. Happiness becomes something quieter, steadier, the natural byproduct of alignment between thought and action, between who you are and how you live. The Stoic doesn't chase peace. He embodies it. And in that embodiment, he finds a strength that no chaos can conquer. The highest expression of Stoicism is not in what you say, but in how you live. Philosophy without embodiment is performance. Philosophy lived in silence becomes legacy. Marcus Aurelius never wrote to impress others. He wrote to discipline himself. His meditations were not meant to be read by the world, yet they became a guide for centuries. The Stoic does not chase admiration, he becomes admirable through consistency. True influence begins when your actions align so fully with your principles that words become unnecessary. To live as the example means to let virtue speak louder than voice. When others complain, you remain calm. When others seek comfort, you choose character. When life tests you, you respond not with emotion, but with integrity. Every small act of discipline builds invisible momentum, a life that radiates steadiness in a world addicted to chaos. People will not remember what you preached. They will remember how you carried yourself when everything fell apart. The Stoic legacy is built moment by moment, decision by decision. You do not have to change the world. You have to change the way you face it. To live virtuously in a corrupt world, to remain kind in an ungrateful one, to stay rational in a hysterical one, that is the quiet revolution of Stoicism. You become a living philosophy, a reflection of order amid disorder. And when your time ends, your peace becomes your proof. You will have shown that happiness was never found where others searched for it, in power, approval, or comfort, but where the Stoic always knew it was, in the mastery of self. That is how you live not just as a student of Marcus Aurelius, but as his continuation, an echo of ancient strength in the modern storm. You began this journey searching for happiness in the ruins of your past, in faces, moments, and memories that once defined your joy. But now you understand that happiness was never lost there. It was simply waiting for you to stop searching elsewhere. The circle closes not when you return to what you had, but when you return to yourself. The end of seeking is not emptiness, it's awakening. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." The Stoic life is this act of inner excavation, removing illusion after illusion until you reach what cannot be shaken, your own virtue. Happiness is not a prize to be won. It is the natural state of a mind disciplined in perception, anchored in reason, and aligned with truth. When you reach this point, you no longer look back with longing or forward with fear. You stand in the present, aware, grounded, unbroken. The past becomes wisdom, the future becomes potential, and the present becomes peace. You stop chasing, stop proving, stop needing, and simply are. That is the summit of Stoicism, serenity through self-command. You do not need to return to the place where you lost happiness, because the one who lost it no longer exists. You've evolved beyond that moment, beyond that pain. You've turned loss into lesson, longing into clarity, and chaos into stillness. Now, wherever you stand, you carry the garden within you. You are the source. You are the peace. At the end of all seeking, when every illusion has fallen away, what remains is what has always been yours, yourself. You walked through memories, loss, silence, and rebirth. You searched for happiness in the ruins, in the faces that left, in the echoes that faded. And now, you stand still. Not because you gave up, but because you finally woke up. The peace you were chasing was never hidden in time or circumstance. It was waiting behind your own resistance. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That retreat is not an escape, it's a return. You return to the mind that no longer argues with life, the heart that no longer fears loss, and the soul that no longer begs the world for meaning. This is the final truth of Stoicism. Peace is not granted. It is claimed through discipline, perception, and acceptance. If you've reached this point, it means you've crossed through the noise. You've seen the difference between temporary pleasure and lasting serenity. You've understood that happiness is not where you lost it. It's where you stop needing it. You are no longer the seeker. You are the found. The war between who you were and who you must become is over. So breathe, look around. Everything you need to begin again is already here. The Stoic does not wait for the perfect moment. He creates it through clarity. Walk forward, not as someone searching, but as someone who has already arrived. Because the truth is simple. You never lost happiness. You just forgot where to look within.